On this episode, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. Transponders turned off and it disappears from radar screen. So in 2 minutes, you got the hijacking theory. You tackled that a little bit. The pilots are coming in there. You're going to suicide this plane. You're going to nosedive this plane. You're going to kill everyone on it because there's somebody on that plane that I want dead. When authorities went and looked into his house, they checked out his flight simulator and there was data missing. It was deleted. It was not malfunctioning. It was actively deleted.
Passes through a cloud, comes out. Those 3 orbs are still circling it. Big flash of light and zip.
Definitely always leans me back towards the government conspiracy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a journey shrouded in shadows and secrets where the line between reality and extraordinary blurs into a chilling mystery. Tonight, we delve deep into the enigma of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a tale that begins on a seeming ordinary night of March 8th, 2014. As this Boeing 777 ascended from Kuala Lumpur, destined for Beijing, it carried 239 passengers and crew members into the unknown, never to be seen again. In the blink of an eye, the aircraft vanished from radar, leaving behind a wake of unanswered questions that have captivated and confounded the world for nearly a decade. How could a state-of-the-art aircraft simply vanish, swallowed by the vastness of the ocean? What shadowy theories have emerged in the wake of its disappearance, and what dark truths might they hold? Join us as we untangle the threads of this haunting mystery, exploring the extensive searches that have taken place, the theories that have taken root, and the profound implications for aviation safety and technology. This isn't just a story of a lost flight. It's a chilling reminder how quickly the familiar can become the unfathomable. So pour yourself a drink, settle in, and prepare to unravel the enigma that is Flight MH370, right here on Cocktails and Conspiracies. My name is Shane Squarg, joined, as always, by my esteemed colleague and co-host, Mr. Phillips. And here we are. Cheers. Welcome back to another episode. I themed my drink a little bit. It's got more of a blue hue than a purple here, but admittedly I have been sipping on it for probably longer than I care to admit today. But that's the point of the show, isn't it, right? To enjoy your cocktail and conspiracy? You're on mute, Mr. Phillips.
Oh, God damn it. We're off to a rollicking start here. As I was
We're
saying,
off to a rollicking start.
we're back with more cocktails, more conspiracies, more mute buttons. We're ready to go.
I was ready to just kind of run by myself at this point. I thought this guy was ignoring me because I introduced a brand new style here. And for our regular listeners, this isn't an accident. I didn't just put my finger in an electrical socket.
As much as it looks like it.
As much as it looks like it. But, if we can get a couple people that watch this show because I think I look like a fucking lunatic, then I'm in. I'm ready to go. And hopefully they enjoy a beverage and stick around with us. Mr. Phillips,
listen,
Malaysia Airlines.
If you get more people to watch this show because of that hair, I'll get a tattoo of Giorgio Tsoukalos on my ass. How about that? If that works, I will tattoo him on my ass. No offense, Giorgio. I think you're a great guy. I don't. It's just
I'd like to not see your ass on camera. So maybe you can put it somewhere else that we can actually see it. We can show it on camera because once you bring the ass in, I don't think you're going to be doing like breastfeeding Instagram ads with your asshole.
Like those loopholes? I love that.
Like the loopholes. Yeah, not a lot of loopholes for male assholes.
No, generally.
The cocktails are going to be pushing hard tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, 2014. An airline, Malaysia Airline, obviously, was a scheduled passenger flight from Kuala Lumpur International Airport on its way out to Beijing Capital International Airport. The aircraft's a Boeing 777, big plane, departed about 12:41 local time. Red-eye flight. We've all heard of one of those, probably been on a couple. Maybe not you. You're not much of a flyer, right?
I mean, I've flown more than I'd like to fly. I don't enjoy flying. I do it because I have to, but I don't think I've ever taken a red-eye.
Enjoyment, right?
No,
I don't think I've taken a red eye either. But from where we are, typically red eyes aren't as important. Like usually when you're going, for us at least, you're going West Coast to East Coast. The red eyes make a little more sense because you get here first.
Exactly. No.
We're usually the first morning out. So actually,
fly down.
Ironically enough, well, right, yeah. And for us, we're usually taking the first plane out, which typically, if there is a red eye, that's the plane that you're taking is the one that came in.
Luckily, not anywhere near Malaysia though.
Well, fortunately, we're going to get into the details here.
Yeah.
So the flight was carrying 239 people. Mentioned that earlier. 227 passengers of various nationalities and 12 crew members. Among them were 153 Chinese nationals, 38 Malaysians, and a mishmash of several others from different countries. But that just gives you some context of the people that were on the aircraft.
Yep.
And of course, the plane itself. If you're not familiar with the Boeing 777, you definitely have not flown often. It's probably one of the more popular large aircrafts, known for its safety and reliability.
It's a big boy.
It's a big boy, and it's equipped with a lot of advanced technologies, including satellite communications. The aircraft had a solid maintenance history. It was relatively young in terms of an aircraft's flight hours, I guess.
Right.
I guess that's how you determine it, and deemed perfectly flight worthy or airworthy prior to the flight. So, setting the context here for you all.
Not only that, but both pilots were clean in terms of their mental health. Like none of them had any mental health issues. There was nothing when you kind of look into the pilots that said, hey, this guy's cracking a little bit. Like everything appeared to be, by all accounts, totally, completely normal.
Well, I'm going to challenge you on that. I'm not going to do it yet, but I dug up some dirt on one of the pilots that I think could add to a conspiracy theory here.
All right. I like it.
Before we get into that, do you remember where you were when you heard about this?
I don't. In fact, I couldn't even believe when you said 2014, even with all the research. It didn't process. I was like, holy shit, that was 10 years ago. So now I don't think so. I'm sure I probably heard it on the news at some point. And when it first broke, most people probably didn't really think much of it. You know what I mean? It was, it's a big plane. It's a lot of people that unfortunately perished. But, and when it first
broke,
the plane disappeared. Like, okay. They didn't find anything. They're searching for it.
So I'm not most people. And I did think a lot of it, and this has become one of my favorite obsessions is MH370, probably shockingly enough. And the only reason for that is because you have a flight that is flying over the Indian Ocean, so not necessarily tropical destinations, but it's going in a trajectory that ultimately will have a lot of secluded islands there. And the first thing I can think of in 2014. In 2012, I had decided to step down from my full-time position, working in Manhattan as a director of technology. I decided to pursue my own business. In the midst of doing that, when I had stepped down, I took basically 2 straight weeks to myself, and I did nothing. I was launching my own business, but I was burnt out from commuting to Manhattan. It was about 5 hours round trip every day. Burnt out. So I phased myself out. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to reset. And I decide to binge watch an old TV show that a bunch of friends were always telling me about. TV show is called Lost.
Yeah.
This is 2 years prior to this plane disappearing. The premise of
Which I've
Lost...
never seen.
You've never seen it? Okay.
No, I've never seen Lost.
That's why...
I get the premise. I get the premise of it, but I've never seen it.
Well, so for those that haven't seen it, I guess, Tim, you're included in this.
Yep.
Lost is about an airplane that takes off and then disappears. Off radar, out over the middle of the ocean, it's gone. And the show picks up with the aircraft having crash landed on a remote island, and the passengers have no idea what's going on. And then over the next 10 seasons or so, they go through this process, and it gets a little supernatural, gets a little crazy, gets a little time travel mixed there, it gets kind of a little loopy. It was a fun show, but the core concept was about all these passengers that are flying in an airline that completely disappears. So 2 years after I watched this show, and I binged those 10 seasons in about 2.5 weeks, embarrassingly enough, I would wake up, I would just literally binge watch Lost until I fell asleep, And I did, when I say I did nothing for those weeks, I did nothing. I was resetting my body, and here I am. I need to do another one of those soon, I think. Nevertheless, the first thing that comes to my mind is, holy shit, this is Lost. This is Lost happening right here for us. And that's what got me hooked. It seemed odd that a plane would completely disappear.
Right.
Okay. So let's dive into the official narrative here, because this is going to be important to how we depart from here. The departure and the initial flight after takeoff, the aircraft maintained normal operations, communicated back and forth with the air traffic control until about 1:19 a.m. when it sends its last message, "Good night, Malaysian 370." Now, the reason for this to happen is they were crossing over airspace. And much like when you have a cell phone and you go into a new area, what your cell phone does is it jumps to a new tower. The way that works is what's called a handshake. Two pieces of technology talk to each other, and they pass over the connection. So that's how you can be on a cell phone call, jump from cell tower to cell tower without having any interruption in service. Typically, if you have AT&T, you probably have lots of interruption in service. So this happens, and they're passing over air traffic control to the next one, which I believe was Vietnamese air control they were passing into.
Yes. Yep. It was Vietnam. Yep.
Vietnam. Okay, perfect. So I'm correct on that. I'm trying to pull a couple things out of the air.
You are correct.
So at around 1:21 a.m., which is about 2 minutes later,
I'll be like ABC. I'll be your fact checker.
Oh, goodness gracious. We're going to have a rough night tonight then. That's for sure. So 1:21 a.m., the aircraft's transponders turned off and it disappears from radar screen. So in 2 minutes. Now, I don't want to dive too deep into this, Mr. Phillips, yet, because we want to get there, but it's not even rare or unusual. It's completely unheard of within 2 minutes for you to disappear off the face of a radar clock, right? It just doesn't happen. Go ahead. I see you taking a breath.
I was going to say, that's the first red flag, right? Like, and when I first initially started looking into this years and years ago, I was really heavy into the whole, like, it's got to be aliens or, like, something happened, you know what I mean? But then once I learned that the transponder was turned off and ACARS lost communication, I'm like, that's really weird, right? Like, that's a red flag for foul play for me.
There's generally two ways that a transponder goes off. And it wasn't just radio communication or radar communication. It was everything. All forms of communication were shut off almost simultaneously in those 2 minutes that happened. There's only two ways that happens. One is some sort of fire, like in the cockpit. Basically, the electronic wires can catch, and it would just shut everything down as a safety precaution. I was shocked to learn, and I'm reluctant to tell you this, that this happens all of the time. One in about every 10,000 flights, they have smoke in the cockpit. It's just because I guess the change, right? I was blown away to hear this.
I'm taking all the trains for the rest of my life.
So generally, all this is doing is pilots are trained to be able to mitigate this. It's not that big of a deal when it happens, but in some instances, if the fire kind of gets out of hand and things smoke up and basically the wires start to catch, right? They overheat, whatnot. Dude, if it gets out of hand, they're trained to do it. They turn something off.
That's just so maybe wild.
Changes in elevation.
1 in every 10,000. That's nuts,
1 in every 10,000 happens very often, right? Now, it doesn't
weird.
sound like a lot because you might not take 10,000 flights in your life, but that's
but
given how many flights,
statistically
it happens
speaking,
at least, right? The stat was actually like one in I think it happens like 2 to 3 times a day around the world. So if you're flying,
nuts.
1 over 10,000.
That is batshit crazy.
It's not all going offline. Just let me be clear about that. It's not all going offline.
But it's just the fact that I'm in a metal tube in the air where I shouldn't be, and something's on fire. That's fucking.
It's smoldering. That's all.
That'll make your butthole buck up there. Mine for sure.
Yeah. So anybody getting on a flight, there's something for you.
Compare that to a car, right? And I know there's a lot more electronics in a plane. I know it's not a perfect comparison. It's not apples to apples, but similarly speaking, I mean, car fires happen very infrequently compared to that, right? You're not getting two. I mean. All right, I may have just dug myself a hole. I'm sure around the world you have more than 2 or 3 a day, but it just seems nuts.
Right. It seems nuts because the infrequency of which you're flying in a plane, it seems like it's a lot higher than you're driving a car 100 times a day, you know? It doesn't seem that big of a difference there.
Oh, God.
So
I have no flights booked anytime soon, so.
Yeah, I wanted to really... I knew that one was going to get you on edge as soon as I read that stat, but I think it's important to note that.
When Rogan wants to have us on, I'll fly.
There you go, Joe. That's how you get us there. Maybe we'll take a ride out to there. I think he's only in he's Austin, Texas, not that far. The only other way that all of your communication devices can go offline simultaneously is if a circuit board is pulled out. And that, again, that is located in the pilot's cockpit.
Yeah.
It is not difficult for a pilot to go up and pop that out. Right. But it is impossible for that to pop out on its own. It is a manual process. Without some sort of severe damage. It's not going to happen. But it is totally conceivable a pilot can stand up, open it up, pop it out. Right. Generally, they're...
Yeah.
Right. That's the key point. Generally, that's not going to happen. If something's on fire again, maybe if there's a malfunction, of course, maybe they can do that. But that's the only other way. If something like that was to be happening, if there was smoldering in the cockpit, which again is more frequently thought, or if there's some sort of a malfunction with the circuit board, it would have been announced. It wouldn't happen, and then within 2 minutes be deactivated. It's too quick of a timeline. So file that away. We'll come back to that later. Search efforts. Obviously, this plane disappears now. It's flying. Let me go back to the flight path, the aviation. So following disappearance, military radar, it goes offline to 1:21 a.m. That number to me has always rang a bell. I've always had some weird 121s around that. So it's an interesting timeline, which again, at that particular time, that number was still very apparent to me. So when I hear that, very weird, which adds to my lost theory. Following its disappearance, the military radar is tracking the plane and it's making a sharp turn to the west. It crosses the Malay Peninsula and heads south over the Indian Ocean. Now, that's really, really hard to understand. So this is going to be our first screen share of the night because I think this is going to be important to see here.
We should do a jingle for screen shares.
There we go. That's what I got for you. All right, so I'm going to bring up the flight map here. A whole lot going on here. Thankfully, there's no audio, so we don't have to worry about playing anything. So this red line, if you can see I guess you can't see my cursor, so that's out with that. If you look where it has the big star and says Kuala Lumpur, for those listening, this is just a map of Malaysia right now. And you can see a red line, hard, solid red line, which shoots right up to that little icon of the plane. At that icon of the plane, that's when it's changing over. So you can see it's getting pretty close to Vietnam up there, and that's when it's switching over to Vietnamese air traffic control, where they're waiting to pick them up around 1:21 a.m. is generally what it's in. They're in the South China Sea. All of a sudden, military radar picks the plane taking a hard left turn, and you can see it's coming
hard.
back.
It's almost hard 180 degrees.
It is 180 degrees.
Yes,
point, it's 180 degrees. Yes, I guess maybe not a full 180, but yes, it's almost
close.
You're right.
Yep.
Very close. And so it starts going back over Malaysia to effectively Georgetown. It looks like the next major city right there. Why would this happen? In all likelihood, if there was some sort of a disturbance, or maybe there was that cockpit fire or something was going on, turning around would be totally par for the course. You wouldn't complete the flight. Right. You'd turn around and go back to the closest body of mass, closest airport, closest land, even.
Makes sense.
Because if there is a fire, you're not taking that thing down into the ocean. It's the worst possible thing you could do.
Right.
So you're turning around, you're going back to Malaysia. You're not going to Kuala Lumpur because it's probably too far from you at this point. You've been flying for probably a couple hours at this point. I think they left at 12-ish or so. What did I say before? 12 something. So you're about an hour in the flight or so. Yeah. And I don't know if there's some sort of a time change here that maybe it was a little bit longer, but nevertheless, they're flipping around here. And they're going back to Malaysia. Now, there's all this landmass in Malaysia. You're flying over the whole peninsula. I don't know what other airports exist there. My inclination is that since Georgetown is pinged off here, maybe there's an airport there or around there. I can't imagine there's one airport in the whole country of Malaysia. You also got Thailand right here, too, so there's overboarding. Once it hits there, it continues to shoot up, and it kind of goes north a little bit and just sort of keeps flying. I think they said it's flying for a total of 7 hours. I think that was the number I saw flying around there, which again, maybe some time changes and stuff, or they're tracking it on radar for a period of time until it completely disappears.
Fact check clears. You're right.
We should get a little buzzer. Bing, bing! So now the plane disappears. So this is, again, for those looking online, you can see this right here. This red hard line is the this is the actual travel that we're aware before it goes offline. This dotted line is just a trajectory of where it's supposed to be going out towards Beijing. And then obviously this blue solid line is the turn of the plane. So again, it looks pretty straight, all things considered there, before it kind of juts off almost intentionally into what would be the Indian Ocean or the Andaman Sea. I don't know how you pronounce that specifically, but you got the idea. Very unusual.
Body of water.
Body of water. Right. Very, very unusual for that to be happening right there. Now, again, it's offline. There's no communication back to air traffic control, but this is now military radar that's picking up. Probably more sophisticated than your average radar. At this point, flight's gone. People that are now sitting in Beijing are waiting for this flight to land. They get there about 6:30 in the morning. It's a long flight to get out there, and families are just sitting around. They're waiting for their loved ones or their friends or whomever to land so they can pick them up from the airport. And there is a notification that comes up in the airport that says flight's delayed. Hour goes by, flight's still delayed, half an hour. And at this point, everyone's getting frustrated about an hour and a half later saying, where the heck's this plane? My family's going, it's on its way. It'll be here. We'll let you know as soon as it gets here. Well, now an hour and a half has passed, maybe a little bit, maybe 2 hours at this point, and the Malaysian authorities come out and they make an announcement saying that they've lost communication with the plane, and they're a little vague in what happens there, that they can't find it. They don't know where the plane is, and now obviously you set into this panic, which subsequently creates this incident. This is the Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370. Again, you said it earlier, Tim. It's not unusual for let me backtrack. It is unusual for a plane to crash. It doesn't happen all the time, but it is certainly not unusual that a plane crash would happen or a plane goes missing. Maybe it dives into the sea. We don't know. That's not out of the realm of possibility. Totally normal, totally natural, totally understandable excuse.
Right. Exactly. I don't want to say run of the mill, but it's something that happens.
So search efforts begin. They become one of the largest and most expensive aviation searches in history, world history, involving multiple countries and utilizing advanced technology, including underwater sonar equipment. Excuse me. The search area spanned thousands of square miles around the southern Indian Ocean. So the details kind of supporting the official narrative here. In the weeks following the disappearance, analysis of some of the satellite data in the area revealed that the aircraft had communicated with satellite network via handshakes, which is what we were talking about before with the cell tower, which means as it's traveling through this path that we just showed, satellites are pinging it because there's other mechanics on the plane that are still in communication with it. So although air traffic control has no direct communication, the airplane is still being tracked. You're not always, unless you're actively looking for this and have clears, not always going to be looking for that. So that's usually stuff that's being found later.
Yeah, and because all of that stuff is turned off, the satellites aren't receiving a signal back saying that, hey, this is this particular flight, but they know it's that flight because of where they last tracked it. And obviously, we've got a plane in the sky that we can't find. This satellite is saying that it's trying to connect to something. It has to be that flight. It can't be anything else.
Yep. That's a great explanation, actually. So data basically leads investigators to speculate that the southern Indian Ocean is probably the likely crash site here. In July 2015, just about a year later, a piece of debris identified as a flaperon from a Boeing 777 washed ashore on an island called Reunion Island, ironically enough, confirming that the aircraft has likely met with a catastrophic end in the ocean. Additional debris pieces were then found on various Indian Ocean islands in subsequent years. So, Reunion Island, that's a great opportunity for me to then bring up my next screen share. There we go. There's a little noise. All right. Reunion Island. Here it is. Along the beaches here in Reunion Island, they end up flying a flaperon, which is effectively a shard of a wing. I don't remember the numbers offhand. We're not one of those shows that likes to read you scripts. We kind of go off the cuff here, so we don't have everything written down for us in advance.
I believe it's a French island.
It is a French island, yep. If not told by Forêt de Debut, by some of the words here, some of the names of the places. In any case, on the wing is a serial number that coordinates to this missing flight MH370. They find it on this island and again in subsequent islands around here. Now, the reason I wanted to pull up a Google map here is because this is in the South Indian Ocean, but I'm going to zoom out. Okay. And I'm going to keep zooming out. And I'm just going to switch off into map mode here so we can see this a little bit better. Okay. Here it is. There's Madagascar over there. And there's Reunion Island still.
Hey, I saw that movie with my kids.
Okay, so if you guys can still see, I want you to keep tracking your eyes here. This little outline red island, okay, that's Reunion Island. Okay, I'm still zooming out. That's Reunion Island all the way over there. Now I've got to spin the globe. And if you look up in here, try to get both in key here. In the upper right, there's Malaysia.
So far, it's going to be tough to even get the two of them on the screen.
That's the difference. And I'm zoomed out where you can see almost the entire globe right here.
Yeah.
That is the distance from Kuala Lumpur, which is effectively where it would have not crashed, but let's say it kept going out 7 hours. Last time they saw it on the radars, the North Indian Ocean, just about, I guess you could see my cursor there a little bit, just kind of, maybe let's call it northeast above Malaysia. And a shard of the wing is found out all the way down by Madagascar on a small little island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Official narrative.
Pretty far.
We buy that official narrative?
I don't know. I mean, look, it's very far away, that's for sure.
Very far away. To be
very
found,
far away.
Not that many years, like a year later.
Right.
It's a far distance to travel.
It's a very far distance to travel. While I am not an expert on all things ocean, or an oceanographer, or a marine biologist, not that I think they would be involved in this, there are currents. Currents are strong. They're moving all the time. Is it totally out of the realm of possibility that a current carried something there? No, not necessarily.
Nope.
But it's pretty damn far, I'll give you that.
You're a fish guy, right?
I'm a fish guy. I like fishing. I like keeping fish. I like eating fish. I like all things fish.
What are corals?
Coral is an animal life that generally grows at the bottom of, I shouldn't say the bottom, but on the ocean floor. And they create things like these great coral reefs that are spectacular and stunning and give home to all kinds of animal life. I was doing my best Nat Geo impression there.
Have you ever grown corals yourself? I mean, I know you're more of a freshwater fish guy. Probably.
But my father has. My father has. So he's picked up like frags and done his own corals and things like that. Yeah.
So would you say? I mean, I'm gonna have you speak on behalf of him. Like, how difficult was it to kind of get those corals to grow?
It's
very hard,
very
right?
hard. So saltwater in general is very difficult and more difficult than freshwater to keep. And coral specifically is very difficult. It requires a lot of different parameters that you need to maintain in order to grow that coral.
Right. So I'm not just asking you to deviate this conversation from fish. I wanted to bring it up because that flaperon that was found from that Boeing 777, keep thinking I'm saying one extra 7 there. So the Boeing 777, that's got corals growing on the flaperon, on this shard of big white metal that has a serial number that indicates it's Malaysian Air Flight MH370. It's got corals growing on it. Not only does it have corals growing on it, but it's got corals growing it on both sides, and they're fairly uniform growing on both sides. For anybody that fish keeps, like your father, and you really, by extension here, everyone realizes, or those folks realize, that corals are very difficult to grow. They're like rock shaped. They're not super sensitive, but once they get hold, they can go, but they are easily broken, which is one of the big reasons that, you always see protect coral reef nonprofits popping up all over the place. So to have traveled thousands of miles across the Indian Ocean, a big giant piece of metal, in a year, and in that same year to grow evenly distributed corals on both sides of the flaperon, not one side.
Yeah.
And to be just kind of planted in a beach. Is it impossible? No. Is it implausible? Yes. Is highly unlikely. Again, because corals aren't necessarily going to grow on the surface of the ocean. They're going to be a little further down, and they're not going to necessarily want to be disturbed.
Well,
again,
that's the big piece.
Impossible? No.
Right. That's what I was thinking, right, is the disturbance. So if you have, I don't care what it is, you have a piece of something, anything, I don't care if it's wood, metal, glass, whatever it is, and it's traveling in a current, coral wants something stagnant to hold on to. And yes, comparatively, that piece of metal is stagnant compared to anything else that's moving. Having said that, it's got to be pretty fucking difficult to grow on something that's traveling at that speed through a current.
Yeah. So at this point, July 2015, I hear about MH370. It's really the first you heard about in a while. You heard a lot going on back and forth initially as they were looking for it and conducting, I should say, all these exhaustive searches. Now all of a sudden it disappears out of the news. It pops back up. They find a piece of it on a remote island. Motherfucker, it's lost again to me. It's lost. The plane disappears and they find broken shards of it on an abandoned, not abandoned, but a very remote island. I mean, that is literally the plot line from Lost. And that's immediately when my brain is ticking. This is a conspiracy. This is a conspiracy. This is a conspiracy. I'm shouting it from the rooftops. This is a conspiracy. It has to be. I don't know about all of these other aspects, right? This all comes later on as people do their analysis and they're looking at it. You get people that are much better investigators than you and I looking into this stuff, talking about the corals, finding out about this stuff.
Right.
So what happens to this plane? There's a lot of conspiracies here to start with. I'm going to let you kind of steer us in the direction. What's the one that you've kind of heard and latched on, Tom? Realistic. We'll go from realistic to probably less likely.
Sure. Well, Occam's razor is going to tell you that the most simplest explanation without any other added details is probably going to be the correct reason, right? So it has to be something to do with the pilots, right? They're the one that are in control of the plane. They have control over all the communications in the cockpit. Something occurred with those pilots, whether it be suicide, whether it be a hijacking, but something happened. The communications were turned off intentionally, and that plane was down somewhere in the ocean, right? Like, that's the most plausible from a just outside looking in, again, using Occam's razor. That's probably what happened.
I thought you said earlier that the pilots had a pretty normal background.
As per the official narrative, there was no reason to believe that either pilot wanted to take their life or the lives of 200 plus other people.
Interesting. One of the pilots on MH370, well, really the pilot on MH371.
Right.
There was a pilot and there was a co-pilot. The main pilot, the primary pilot, the captain, if you will. Oh, no, not if you will. I guess that is his official title.
I don't know.
Yeah, captain. Captain Zaharie Ahmad Shah was the captain of the ship. The co-pilot was probably about 24 years old. This captain, born in 1961, so that probably makes him, what, at that time, like 50-something at the time when this all happened. Almost 60, give or take. Yeah, not good at quick math here. I'm not going to go too much into his background or anything like that, but he was a very accomplished pilot, over 18,000 hours of flight experience. Like you said, very big family man. In his personal life, he was known for donating quite a bit of both money, food, and his time to feeding the homeless, campaigning for shelters, advocating, I guess is a better word for that. Very giving person. A couple weeks prior to this particular flight, he starts to become very distant from his family. Reports of him just sort of secluding himself in his basement. He had built his own flight simulator in his house, which I found is not that uncommon for people in aviation. There are like things like Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is a very popular program. So you could build like a cockpit around you and stuff like that. So he was just kind of sequestering himself down in his basement, running this flight simulator kind of nonstop. And things kind of got a little rocky there. And I think it was 3 or 4 days, maybe about a week prior to this flight taking off, his wife and his 2 children left. They left the house and they were moving out. And so now he's by himself and he's about his next flight, his next time flying was this flight. Interestingly enough, when authorities went and looked into his house and tried to look into the pilots and see if anything was there in the background there, they checked out his flight simulator and there was data missing. It was deleted. It was not malfunctioning. It was actively deleting. It's unknown how much was dug up from that, because you're never going to really know from the authorities. There's a lot of people's hands that are getting dirty in this now, because this isn't just a Malaysia issue anymore. China's involved. The United States are involved. There's a lot of other countries getting involved here for reasons, again, we don't know, but this became an international incident. So this guy...
You have passengers on that flight from all over the world. Do you think that's why there were so many different nations involved in search efforts?
On the surface, yes. When you have Chinese nationals that are on a flight that goes missing, what is primarily Chinese, that's why China's involved.
Sure.
Why the United States got involved? Speculative.
Britain was involved. You can
just say because we're a superpower. Britain was involved too, as well. Yep. There's a lot of countries that were. Now they were all chipping in for the search effort as well, because it becomes an international incident. Nobody has any idea what this plane is. Everyone. You see this all the time when other countries kind of chip in other stuff. But the investigations are happening. They're looking into all this stuff. They see that a lot of his flight simulators are him flying through the Indian Ocean. Again, not unusual, and it was not the same path that MH370 took. So put that out there. It's not unusual for him to be doing that because that is generally the area that he's flying in. But it was unusual that data was outright deleted. Doesn't know if it was malicious or not. The authorities basically came out and said that, you know, they don't think there's anything of it. But I think that's important to note. This pilot, Zaharie Ahmad Shah, Captain Shah here, gets on a plane within a week of his wife and his children leaving him, and the plane disappears. And what did we say before? There are two ways that communication goes down. Way number one is a fire in the cockpit, which wouldn't happen fast enough that they couldn't tell somebody, or that it would burn the controls out before those 2 minutes are up, because they were very calm. I mean, you can listen to the flight recordings if you look into it. I'm not going to pull those up right now because,
and not only that,
effectively pointless for us.
If the fire was that bad, one would think, and I'm no aviation expert, but one would think that if you have a fire that's that bad, that's going to effectively cause that plane to go down, that plane's not going to stay in the air for 7 more hours. Sort of
presumably
rules that out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The other aspect was popping out that circuit board.
Yeah.
Could that have happened? Now you've got a guy that generally is a happy guy, but he is a little bit older, and we've talked about mental health things in the past, right? They do creep up on you. We've talked about it in different contexts, but sometimes, you know, Robin Williams was a really happy guy too, and then he killed himself. And you see this all the time with suicide. You always hear, "Oh my God, I would have never guessed," or "I never knew." And all the time with people or celebrities. And if you have a guy that's constantly giving and constantly donating his time, and for whatever reason has this falling out with his family, something smells fishy. Now, do I think that means that he was on a suicide mission? Not necessarily. You got the hijacking theory. You tackled that a little bit. The pilots are coming in there. There are two pilots. There's a pilot and a co-pilot. Could he have, I guess, I don't know what's the word for, just, I don't want to say dismember his co-pilot, but basically like subdued him some way. Like, you think that's in some way, possible? Yeah, you know, or told him, you know, "Oh, you have to go to the bathroom" or something. A guy gets up to go to the bathroom. He like locks him out of the cockpit and spins the plane around. I would imagine he's got a key to get in. I don't know. Yeah. That struck me as really odd. Again, not necessarily.
He could have slipped something in his drink. I mean, he could have cut the guy's fucking throat for all we know. I mean, you know, is it unlikely? Yeah, but it could happen.
Where I started to lean more is, you see a guy that is, for all intents and purposes, a family man, right? And all of a sudden, he is sequestering himself from his family. He's pushing them away. He's kind of hanging out by himself. He's acting very out of character to the point where it causes a rift in his marriage. His wife takes the kids and leaves. That behavior, to me, I think back to personal story. Again, a little anecdote. My aunt died from lung cancer. Literally a month to the day of my father dying from colon cancer. Before she died, she had this boyfriend, you know, older woman. She had been married previously, just didn't work out. Never was going to marry again. You know, kind of shunned off men for a very big period of life because she got fucked over, more or less. Long story short on that. Meets this guy. The guy's awesome. He is a part of our family. He's coming to every holiday. He's around for a couple of years. One of the nicest gentlemen I've ever met. And all of a sudden, it's done. He's gone, and she won't talk about it. And, you know, he still sends my grandmother flowers. He still sends her cards for her birthday and for holidays. He still calls and checks in on everybody. We're like, what could have possibly happened? This guy was great for you. And she's older at this point, you know, 60 years old. So it's not like it's not like she's young and out in the town skipping around. She's 60, like she's on the back half of her life. Right. And it wasn't like it was a recent thing. She was with this man for a period of time. We come to find out after she drops dead one. It literally drops to the floor, goes to the hospital, and she dies within a day and a half, 2 days. Because she had cancer, and she did not want to go through treatments. And she didn't tell anybody she had it because she knew she'd have to go through chemo. We have a long history of cancer in our family. And so she saw what that did to other people in her family, didn't want to go through that, and died. This guy comes back around. He comes to the funeral, obviously, and he talks to my grandmother afterwards and says, "I'm sorry I held this from you. I've known about this, and he's known about it for probably almost a year. I think like 8 to 12 months or so. And she basically pushed him away and broke off their relationship with the intention of saying that this will be easier for you if we're separated. She didn't want him to be, heartbroken from it. So what seemed like she was being selfish at the time was actually her being like kind of generous in a way, like, just get away from me.
Right.
I'm a dead end. Go find somebody else the rest of your life. Why do I bring this up? You have a guy that is very much involved in his community and in doing things for good for other people. You have a guy that now all of a sudden changes his personality, his snap, and he sequesters himself. He goes out, he's by himself, he's distancing himself from his family to the point that his family get up and leave. Now, the report is that they got up and left. Did they leave, or did he make them leave? Did he tell them to leave? And so the reason I say that is you've got a flight that's flying from Malaysia to China. There's always tensions with China because they're a communist country and there's spy going on all over the place. There's always just political tensions going on back and forth over the place. Is it plausible that somebody came to this guy and basically said, you're going to suicide this plane, you're going to nosedive this plane, you're going to kill everyone on it because there's somebody on that plane that I want dead?
And is it possible that they said, if you don't, we're going to fucking kill your family?
Exactly. Nailed it. And maybe they give this guy a payout. Maybe he takes a big fat life insurance policy. That much I don't know. But maybe somehow they get money and he's basically sequestering them because he doesn't know what to do. And then when he sends them off, it's to absolve them of anything here, to make it look like this was him just kind of going nuts and stuff. And this becomes intentional because he knows what he's about to do.
Yeah.
It would be the craziest thing you ever heard.
It's an interesting theory. Look, you have a family. I have a family. If you were put in that predicament, you would do anything to save your family. I know you well enough. You would easily do that. I would do the same, right? So it's not an outlandish thought. Like, I mean, think about it. You're put in that scenario. You have absolutely no way out of it. Who are you going to choose? I'm going to choose my family to live. Do I feel terrible that many other people and myself are going to die? Of course. But I'm picking my family first, man.
We're all selfish. Right. We're all selfish, especially when it comes to, the people that you actually know and care about. So if that theory holds any weight, that this was an intentional destruction of this plane, why would it happen? And so this leans into theories that are harder to prove, but I was able to pull up just enough research to give it some weight. Okay. We all know searching Twitter or X can come up with a lot of crazy stuff, but I have seen over the years, and I made sure I bookmarked a couple things. On that flight were 4 members of a patent for a semiconductor that were traveling on that flight. Okay. Do you know what a semiconductor is?
I do. This is starting to get a little Titanic-ish.
We're starting to get a little Titanic-ish, right?
If you think back to our Titanic episode. If you haven't, go back and watch it.
You know what, Tim? I like that. A nice little promo there. Shameless plug. So on this flight are 4 people who hold a patent for the semiconductor. For those unaware what a semiconductor is, the really basic stripped down answer of it, it's a device that's effectively going to help elevate technology, right? So you see all of NVIDIA is kind of popular right now. I mean, most people knew what that was before from graphics cards and stuff. They're also creating semiconductors. The purpose of these things is to increase compute power. So with the burst of AI and all the new servers, that's why stocks like NVIDIA are shooting up, because they're crafting better, faster, and smaller semiconductors that can dissipate heat. They can operate at a faster speed, so on and so forth. In any case, they're employees from a company called Freesale Semiconductor that have developed this technology, right? They are on this plane. There's an assertion that a gentleman, a prominent British financier, becomes the sole owner of this patent if there's a disappearance of these individuals. If they disappear, he's in the process of buying it out. Of course, there's no credible evidence of that, but that is highly theorized in circles, largely because of his financial interests in other companies. His name happens to be Jacob Rothschild.
Ooh. Well, that's
Have we heard that name before?
That's an interesting little tidbit. You mean the people that own the whole fucking world?
Not only own the whole fucking world, but the people also related to the Titanic.
That it is.
We're tying in a lot to these episodes now. There is confirmation that is 100% true that there were several individuals on that flight, MH370, that were associated with the semiconductor industry. Them having the patent is a little wishy-washy, and Jacob Rothschild having an interest in it is a little wishy-washy. But the fact that they were in that industry strikes as very coincidental to me, given this theory and then given that trajectory of the plane. I just thought that was an interesting little one to bring up. I'm not going to lean on it. Patents, the way they work is you don't just file a patent with one office. So like if you're in the United States, you file with the US Patent Office, that's fine. That means if you send your stuff out to China, you don't have a patent in China, they can just knock your stuff off and sell it all over Europe. You only have a patent in the United States. They're going to steal it anyway, make their own version of it. Of course.
China going to do what China do.
It costs a lot of money to get a patent in every country, and then it has to be honored and enforced. People can still knock off your products, which is how you see them all on Amazon. You have to go through a legal process to enforce it. Something as big and as technically advanced as like something like a semiconductor or improvements to that are going to be a lot harder to knock off, and there's a lot more money behind it, so you're generally not going to be able to just knock it off and get away with it. There will be heavy lawsuits because now we're talking tens of billions of dollars, not thousands, $100,000, $1 million. There's patents in United States, then you can go to the EU, and then the EU kind of gets the whole European Union patents, but there's other basically sub-regions where patent offices are held. So you might have a patent in one place and not in other places, and a lot of these patents could sometimes be under names and subsidiary companies and whatnot. Generally, there's always a name tied to the patent, at least in the United States. So it is plausible that those patents do exist, and it is plausible that all this happened, and we just can't find that information because of the way other patent offices don't work, or the way other patent offices work, and they don't provide that information.
Right.
So I wanted to give you that because I thought that was really interesting because, again, if we look at, I'm going to bring this up one more time. If we look at the trajectory of this plane and what it's doing, you're shooting up, right? You're turning. There's a hook turn right here, a 180-degree turn, and you're flying just about in a straight line. For whatever reason, you shoot back up. So if the pilot's incapacitated or something and it's on autopilot, you'd almost assume it would just keep going straight down in a straight line over Indonesia, right? It doesn't, though. It hooks back up into the Indian Ocean, and it's intentionally trying to bury itself somewhere. Yeah. Just thought that was an interesting observation right there.
Yeah, it's so the key word, right? You said if those patent holders disappeared, right? So it wasn't as if those patent holders died for some particular reason that you could prove. So if those patent holders disappeared, then someone else would own that patent, right? So if that plane
if they died, if they died in general, I used the word disappeared because that was how I worded it in my notes.
Never mind.
Yeah. I don't think it was actually worded like that. I can't speak to that, but you can still kind of push your theory. That's fine. Works for me. But yeah, I think it's more if they die or, vanish without a trace, there's nobody to really fight with it. There could be something in there where, if they're just kind of gone, then, it is what it is. Nobody's going to know the difference. But how do you feel about that so far?
Look, it's a very interesting one. We know that power and money push people to do things that are unimaginable. So if somebody really felt that strongly about that power and that money that came from owning the patent that semiconductor, you think they give a shit about 239 people aboard a plane? They're going to give a fuck less if that means they're going to sit on a fat wad for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
Some people suck.
Some people suck. So that's my general theory if we're thinking from the perspective of the pilot. I don't know that that's the theory I subscribe to because there's other pieces of evidence here that sort of take me away from that. This is when stuff starts to get crazy because as time goes by, more information starts leaking out. There's investigators hitting the scene and whatnot. One of the next big theories that you can't dismiss because now you have to look at the involvement of the countries, right? We talked about the United States and Britain earlier, but I'm going to lean on the U.S. because we've learned over our past, 27 episodes here in Cocktails and Conspiracies that the U.S. government isn't always telling us the truth.
Get the fuck out of here.
I like that.
They don't tell us the truth.
We're always in this perennial state of not war, but almost like a Cold War atmosphere with countries like Russia and China, where even though we're not shooting guns at each other, we're always doing things to undermine one another. And when you look at the people that were on that plane and how many Chinese were on that plane, could it have been a show of strength? Could it have been a military exercise? Could they have been trying to take out somebody on that plane that was Chinese? Could they have just been trying to abduct the plane? All of those things seem fairly plausible, right?
Could it have been a testing of a new weapon?
It could have been a testing of a new weapon. So I want to bring up our Google map again, because I think this is going to be important to the next leg of conversation. Okay, I'm going to pull this down, and I'm actually going to, can I close that without getting rid of my pin? No, I can't. Well, I'm going to have to keep my pin up. So we're going to go with it. Boy.
Figure it out.
All right. Well, I was hoping not to do my pin. So you could see I have a pin here that says ground-based electrical optical, I guess it's saying. There you go. Optical deep space surveillance. Blah, 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 blah. There is a base.
Is that on an island?
That is on an island in the British Virgin Islands. No, I guess not the British Virgin Islands. I don't know what this is right here. What is this island called? I don't even know that it has a real name. There is a name to it. I don't really know what it's called. But it's called Diego Garcia, the British Indian Ocean territory. Okay?
Looks a little bit like Staten Island, just out in the fucking ocean.
At this point, there you go. At this point, the British owned this. They actually ended up turning this back over to the original people, the natives on here, with the exception of this right here, Diego Garcia, which is a U.S. military base. Okay? Mm-hmm. Why is this important? Let me zoom out. Where is Diego Garcia?
Smack in between Reunion Island and Malaysia.
Reunion Island is right down here, and here's Malaysia. Look at that. It is dead center. I mean, it is dead center. It could not, I mean, I'm sure you could take out a tape measure and measure this, and it is pretty much dead center. Now, remember, our plane it was coming out of Malaysia. It was going up this way towards Vietnam, and it turned back, and then it shot up this way. So by the time it goes down in that Andaman Sea, right here, where my cursor is, all the way down to Reunion Island. I mean, that is a straight shot. Is it plausible that the United States military either came up and took that plane out or captured that plane and brought it to Diego Garcia? And there's a prevailing theory that the U.S. has taken that plane. They have taken custody of that plane. Maybe they executed the people. There's been some stories that somebody was on the island and he was like texting or sending communications out somehow, which again, if it's a military base, they're going to have some sort of satellite connection there. So it's not unlikely, but that there's been reports and stuff of that. I don't know that any of those are proven or whatnot, but very intriguing that this happens to sit smack in the middle of the two of them. And then if you're going to go and plant evidence, Reunion Island is right there, which is, I mean, there's probably other small islands around, like you can see Port Mathurin, but there's going to be islands that nobody's really going to pay much mind to. But this is something that's somewhat populated where you know people are going to find it, and it's close enough where you can do that. And there are graveyards for old Boeing 777 planes. You can easily get a piece, change the number on it, and slap it down there. And again, they did on other islands as well. Seems a little interesting now, right? Government cover-up. It's the one we always come back to. What's the United States' involvement? I don't know, but the fact that there were so many Chinese on that plane, I've seen some people speculate, you know, maybe it's to show strength to the Chinese. Maybe it's something more than that. Don't really know. But I thought that was an interesting one to kind of bring up there.
Look, I mean, we know our government has done worse to our own people, so it's not out of the realm of possibilities that they would do that as a show of force to what is essentially an enemy state.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So where this story kind of takes a hard turn for me is now there becomes leaked evidence of, I don't know where this came from. They're saying it's government evidence. I don't know if that's true or not. I think for the most part, it is basically leaked satellite imagery from the government monitoring this. Along the way, I mean, there's been plenty of documentaries that have interviewed people that said that they saw flashes in the sky from some of the islands all over the different place. Hard to substantiate a lot of that stuff. So I'm going to go back to our favorite platform, X here, and I'm going to bring up a video that I want everyone to see here. So I think this one's going to be interesting to watch. It's about a minute long, but it's going to say 2 minutes. We're going to watch that minute, and we're going to try to stay silent. Video of all time. This is where we're starting to get into fun stuff here. So I'm going to play this video, and then we'll come back to it. I know I said I was going to play it all the way through, but just for some context here, folks, for those that are just listening and they're not watching, this is the plane, the outline of MH370 that's flying through, and you can see that radar image there.
I'll give it the play-by-play. So that plane is passing through a cloud. It's traveling. Looks like it's turning a bit.
This, I think, is that hook, that turn it was doing.
Yes. All of a sudden, we get what I could only describe as an orb. One orb that kind of shoots in a frame, followed by two more that are now circling that plane in a triangular motion. Think about if you were juggling. These orbs are just kind of going around this plane, just like you would be juggling three, I don't know, fucking beanbags.
Look at that. There's three orbs circling around like that. How weird is that?
Yep. Passes through a cloud, comes out. Those three orbs are still circling it. Big flash of light, and zip, plane's gone.
It's gone. It's fucking gone. It disappears. I'm gonna rewind that. You notice how fast they start to get too?
Yes. So that's true. They do accelerate in speed.
Look at that. It's just a flash of light and it's gone.
Do you remember when this came out, this video? It wasn't that long ago. It's 2024. I want to say within the past... I could be way off on this, but I feel like it was only 2 years ago or so that this came out.
I think it was a couple more years earlier than that. I think this was... Yeah, I think this was a few years ago. I don't think this was
not important.
That recent.
Just, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it was that recent. And I think there's been enough research into it. Again, I'm speaking off the cuff here. I'm not saying that we did the research, but from what I understand, most of the community acknowledges that this is a real video that came from some sort of U.S. intel. It's not just something that it was dug up on the internet. There are other videos as well, and I'm going to bring up another one right here, and then we can kind of get into theories. So there is... I mean, people have also said this is kind of like visual effects here as well, but again, it's going to be hard to really do that. Actually, you know what? I think there's a video here that does both. So I'm going to do those together and we can see what that looks like. So this is more of like looks like a thermal type imaging of the video I'm going to bring up. What's going to show a lot of the same stuff. I actually have this one that's synced. It's 10 seconds. It's really just going to the meat and potatoes of what we're seeing here, the flash, just so you can kind of see what that looks like. So I'll play this. On the left here is that thermal image, and on the right is that video you just saw. Just 10 seconds of that whole video. You can see those orbs circling again.
Yep.
Boom.
It's gone. Just gone. So what's interesting about that video too, the thermal video, is that when you're looking at the plane, right, you can see the heat signatures from the engines are very hot. They're bright red. Mm-hmm. Those orbs that are circling the plane are not. They're green. They're much cooler. I find that to be interesting because you would think that... I don't know what those orbs are, right? Whether it be some kind of UAP or some kind of a weapon. You would associate something that's flying at that altitude and at that speed with something that's going to generate heat. And with that thermal footage, it's showing you that it's not. And I think that's somewhat significant.
That's hugely significant. But this becomes where it gets to the craziest part because...
Yeah.
So some people said, I want to add this for context because I think it's important to cover just to say we're doing our due diligence. And I took the video off here, but you remember what it looks like. There was the heat signature that was coming from the engine, but there was one on the bottom of the plane that some people are suggesting is like a fire. The plane's actually on fire there a little bit. I don't know that that's true. I'm reading it more like you are, like that's the heat signature from it, and it's just like flame coming out of that.
Kind of trailing, you're right.
Trailing, yeah, and it's just the way it's being picked up on. I'm not a thermal imaging expert, so maybe I'm completely, but I mean, the exact quote here, the left edge and heat signature is short and round, but the right is not. Frame by frame, it's morphing and evolving, and you know, that's why they say it could be like a visual effects hoaxer. Totally plausible, for sure. But that's a lot of work to go into, and it aligns really well with that other video from a different perspective that has come out. And the videos are fairly long too. So what do we think this is, Tim? Because now
that's one of my favorite pieces of evidence that I've ever seen, and I remember when it came out. Clearly not too well because it was probably more than 2 years ago. But I was enamored with that. I was like, holy fucking shit, dude. Like that. Now, granted, right? you have to believe the video, right? If you don't believe the video and you think it's a hoax, then all of this goes by the wayside. And I got to tell you, I'm still 50-50. I don't know, right? I mean, unless Jesus comes down right now and tells me, hey, Tim, that's some real video footage. I'll probably spend the rest of my life saying, I don't know if that was real or not. But if that video footage is real, that is one of the most astounding pieces of evidence that anybody has ever captured. It is absolutely wild.
There has been a lot of analysis on those videos because, of course, a lot of people are suggesting that it was hoaxed and it's faked and it's just visual effects that are going on there. By all accounts, a lot of the analysis endorsing the video have actually debunked the debunkers by saying, the stock footage you're trying to show doesn't align. There's this that's wrong. There's that's wrong. There's other aspects of those longer form videos that don't look like they account for it. To your point, though, I guess it's always up for interpretation, but because this is Cocktails and Conspiracies, despite being conspiracy realists, we are going to assume that video is real for the sake of the rest of the conversation here. The next goes into, what actually happens. So where does my mind immediately go? Again, Tim? Lost.
I'm assuming you're going back to Lost.
I'm going back to Lost because this is exactly what is happening. Spoiler alert for those who haven't watched Lost. At the end of the movie,
I'm only kidding, God.
You find out that it wasn't really a plane crash. Something more nefarious happened. Well, I take that back. It was a plane crash, but they're not actually stranded on a desert island. They're dead, and they're in the between of the afterlife and the current life. But in the midst of that, there's a lot of paranormal kind of freaky stuff that goes on.
They're in purgatory.
So my mind is absolutely racing, and it's going crazy now. Since seeing the MH370, there also came out a TV show, and I'm trying so desperately to remember what it was. I got to look it up.
Quantum Leap. I'm kidding. I know it's
no. Oh God, that was one of my favorite ones. Yeah, TV show
I know, it's
about missing plane. I guess it was Manifest. That's it.
The Manifest. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, yes. That was more recent, right?
That was relatively recent. Actually, it was canceled. Netflix picked it up. I think it came out in 2018. I'm seeing it. Netflix picked it up, and then it got an extra season to because it was supposed to be a 5-year stretch. That's how they wrapped it up. Netflix basically brought it back. It did well on Netflix, and they revived it to finish out the series. Long story short about that show.
Is that like an NBC thing? I feel like I remember seeing promos for that on Sunday Night Football or something like that.
Stock NBC has a good show, and then they kill it, even though it was designed to be a 5-year show. Basically, a plane disappears. Right, it takes off and it doesn't land, and again, it becomes MH370, which gets this is happening afterwards, so maybe it was inspired by it. But plane takes off, disappears, and then it comes back, and I think it was longer than 5. No, maybe it was just 5 years later, something like that. I don't think it was 10 years. Missing for 5 years. Yeah. So the plane's completely gone, missing for 5 years, and then one day shows up and it lands, and everybody on the plane, no time is left. They took off when they landed, but everyone else in real life lost 5 years. So, you have a young boy in the plane that's now 5 years older. So he's actually, older than his older sister. I'm sorry. His younger sister is now older than him because of the way it worked out. And so on and so forth. In any case, the whole series was set up to be 5 years because it's going when they left and coming back, and then they kind of bridge in the time the whole way through. And of course, NBC has to cancel it early. In any case, it reminds me a lot of that now too. Where does it go? And again, it goes a little bit more supernatural into godlike things. Now I see floating orbs, and what's the first thing that comes to my mind? You said earlier is
UFOs.
Q. UFOs, right?
I don't like UAP. I'm never going to use the word UAP.
No, fuck UFOs.
I'm saying UFO.
I'm thinking aliens.
I'm sticking with it.
I'm thinking aliens. I'm thinking aliens. It's obvious, right? It's the go-ahead answer. We have video footage of orbs circling a plane, circling faster, and the plane outright disappearing, and doing so in a way that we know it disappeared in the Indian Ocean. We know it's gone. It's vanished. It went off radar. Completely disappeared. There's no sign of anything. They spent thousands, not more than thousands, millions of dollars searching for wreckage. Everything about the conspiracy, nothing of it adds up. But then you get these videos that are allegedly leaked. Plane disappears. Aliens. Is it aliens?
It's my favorite theory. It's my favorite one because it's the most fun.
It's my favorite theory too.
But here's the kink in that theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have some government entity from whatever nation, that is depositing quote-unquote wreckage into the sea to be washed up on shores, or even planting it on those shores.
Mm-hmm.
How does that coincide with the whole alien thing, right? And for me, that leans a little bit more on we're testing something, whether it be a weapon or some kind of, I don't know, maybe possibly even time travel device. And
Yep.
look, we're the conspiracy realist. I know that's way out there, right? I'm not saying that I necessarily believe this, but
Is
I
it?
think that it leans a little bit more in that direction, because what would be the incentive for somebody to go ahead and then plant wreckage on these islands?
The
That's what
wreckage
I kind of lean
aspect
towards.
definitely always leans me back towards the government conspiracy. There's talks that
Right.
it was an accidental shoot down too, that maybe they shot the plane out not realizing what it was, and then they have to cover it up because like you cannot say
Right.
that an army just shot out a plane from the sky. But it doesn't explain the sudden turnaround though either, right? Like there's nothing that
Right.
adds up there. Even still, why would that have played? I still don't understand why that plane turned around under any circumstance. None of that adds up to me, unless it
No, it
was
doesn't.
remotely controlled. So back in 2000, call it five ish, which is a period of time after a very prominent event in the United States where planes were allegedly hijacked and
Mm.
drove into buildings. A company by the name of Honeywell worked with the Department of Defense to develop devices that they can put on planes that effectively are called uninterrupted autopilot. They will take over the planes and allow you to control them remotely. There's nothing a pilot can do on the plane
Is this the
that
same
would be
company
able
that
to
makes
stop it.
thermostats?
Yes, it is. Honeywell's a government
Is it
contractor.
really? I said
Yes,
that
it
as a
is.
joke.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. Yep. They're a huge government contractor. So if you have Honeywell devices in your house, you may want to get rid of them. We'll do a nice big episode on the big concrete building that's sitting in Manhattan that AT&T built, and how that's a government building and how they
Mm.
openly give their information to the government. So another one for you guys. But for today's purpose, Honeywell develops these devices and they never hit market. And I'm using finger air quotes here for those listening. They never hit market. By all accounts, most people in the know in that industry are assuming that they are in every single aircraft that exists now. And they're just not admitting it because
Right.
that's what these black ops programs tend to do, these behind the scenes things. But
Sure.
this device was tested and it can completely remote control a plane. So, prevailing theory, government takes control of this plane, spins it around. This is 2014, we said. This device was
Yeah.
created in 2005-ish, started to be created in response to 9/11. We talked a lot about plane theory in our most recent episodes in 9/11. We did 2 episodes with Mark Conlon where planes
Yeah.
aren't always what they seem. Now, we focused more on holograms, and I don't think that this is the case here. But if you went with the holograms, Tim, that's 2001. If you believe the hologram theory,
Yeah.
this is now what could be considered direct energy weapons, could be considered wormholes, could be considered any sort of advanced alien, or I'm sorry, advanced human technology that could look alien to us. I think we'd be remiss to not mention a gentleman by the name of Ashton Forbes, who's become sort of the de facto guy in MH370. He's on Twitter and YouTube. He was just recently on Candace Owens, campaigning to get on Joe Rogan. He has sort of taken probably the most prominent position with regards to this and has declared that it is advanced energy weapons. He's done a lot of research, a lot of investigation on it. I don't know that I buy direct energy weapons. I mean, it could be, but
Sure.
that doesn't, I don't know, man. Those videos don't look
What
like
if
directed energy weapons to me.
what if those orbs were some kind
Mhm.
of advanced direct energy weapon, and it just vaporized that plane and everything in it instantaneously, and there was literally nothing left but atoms? I mean, it was just
Plausible.
you would have no debris. You would likely have no heat signature. It would just be gone.
Totally plausible. Why hit a commercial airline with an advanced energy weapon?
Look, I think it's odd, that's for sure. But I also think that the people and the people that are in charge of these companies that produce these things, there is so
Mhm.
much money on the line that they don't give a fuck,
They
right?
just
And so
they
if you
just
want
picked a
to,
plane one day.
They don't care. They don't give a shit. These we're talking about nefarious people. I mean, these people are not good people. And when there's that much money on the line, if they need to prove to, whatever government agency that this thing that they created actually works, they don't give a shit. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
choose whatever's most convenient to them. And maybe that coincides with why it was so close to that US base, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I think it's
So
entirely plausible.
I mentioned before there was a story about somebody that said that they were in Diego Garcia, and I pulled that up for
Yep.
context because I think it's important to talk here. He goes and posts on 4chan. In 2016, a man named Daniel M., full name was withheld for privacy reasons, surfaced with claims that he had been abducted and taken to Diego Garcia shortly after the plane's disappearance. He asserted that he was there for several days, but eventually he managed to escape. He claimed he was taken by unidentified individuals to a remote location where he was interrogated, described being taken aboard a military aircraft, and that's when he said, Diego Garcia. Also mentioned witnessing the aftermath of what he believes to be a plane crash. According to Daniel, the U.S. government was involved in a cover-up regarding what happened to MH370. He speculated that the plane had been brought to Diego Garcia after being hijacked or experiencing technical failure. Okay, let's come back to that. His narrative suggested the military had some knowledge of the flight's fate but chose to withhold the information from the public. And obviously it goes into some of the skepticism of it and the fact that there's no credible evidence, as are most things here. So let's for a second pretend that Daniel's claim is true.
I'm confused on Daniel's statement. So he says that he was abducted and taken to the base. Is that what he's saying?
He's on the plane. He was on the plane.
Oh, so he's saying he was on the plane. Got it.
Oh, I'm sorry. He had been abducted and taken to Diego Garcia shortly after the plane's disappearance. He was there for several days.
So he was a passenger.
Yes.
Got it.
It sounds like that. He speculated the plane had been brought to Diego Garcia after being hijacked or experiencing technical failure. So by that account, if I'm understanding it correctly, by that account, the plane was taken over. So does that align now with the theory of that remote control from Honeywell? Maybe.
Well, could be. Yeah.
If we want to think about those orbs, though, for a second, let's go back to those. We talked about the direct energy weapon. There's also been speculation of it being like a wormhole, right? Where it could have zapped that plane and brought it to Diego Garcia through some sort of a worked wormhole, whatever it might be. I don't know, man. I mean, those things seem very out of... I can't explain the orbs, that's for sure. Those things seem very out of control to me. The idea that Diego Garcia sits in between where the wreckage was found and where the plane was last seen blows my mind. The involvement of the U.S. in this and knowing what they've done in the past and knowing their issues with China, very curious to me. The semiconductors, that adds up. I have to believe there's some government influence. I would almost knock out the alien abduction story because of that, because there's so many other threads that pull to the government. Directed energy weapons, though, and I struggle to reconcile this with the 9/11 stuff, even with the holograms and the planes. It's difficult for me to wrap my head around it, largely because it's alien technology, no pun intended. But
sure,
I think so. The guy Ashton Forbes has been pushing this pretty aggressively, and I started to buy in quite a bit. My issue with Ashton Forbes, and I doubt he'll watch this, but he does watch a lot of MH370 stuff, is what always happens with people in this space is they get very defensive when they become an influencer in the space. And that is what he's become. And his narrative of these directed energy weapons is the narrative now. Like if you go in any MH370 groups, most people are subscribing to this, but that means they're also subscribing to him. And he's getting influencer payments because of this. He's appearing in Candace Owens. He most recently started talking that he knew how to, or he was researching how to get free energy, which I do believe in. And that's another episode for another day. I believe there is free unlimited energy outside that we just have to figure out how to grasp it. But now he's like selling access to that and using videos from like the 1990s of stuff. When you start to intertwine people selling shit in any conspiracy space, that's a red flag to me as well. And so the sales are directly linked to the idea that the government is testing free direct energy weapons, which coincides with this free energy that he's trying to sell access to get these little generator things. That's why I think, if nothing else, that's why I become reluctant on that. I can't explain the orbs otherwise.
No, neither can I. And like I said, I mean that's one of the most profound pieces of evidence I've ever seen. You have to believe the video, and I don't necessarily know that I do. I want to because it's just fucking wild.
Yeah.
It is absolutely wild, and as you mentioned earlier, there really hasn't been a very good argument debunking it. In fact, most folks that tried to debunk it, we end up debunking their debunk. And I don't
Right.
like
They
we,
fail.
but
They fail at debunking it.
right, exactly.
The video, for all
So,
intents and purposes, is
yeah,
pretty well
it's
done. And a lot of the
yeah,
times, so when you have these fake videos, there was just a video going around about Bigfoot. So this is a good example here. The video about Bigfoot was very hard to debunk, and you actually couldn't debunk it because it was a crystal clear video. When you have the grainy videos, it also becomes hard to debunk because there's grains, there's pixelation around all the videos,
sure,
right? When you try to debunk it, the grainy videos are really easy to debunk because you can see blur lines around where the grain is because they're trying to patch things into the grain. Newer
yeah,
videos are easier to distinguish in AI because they're going to make everything perfect. The more perfect the video is, the more likely something like AI or CGI can kind of factor into that because the entire intention of those programs is perfection. You
sure,
have to work harder to make it less perfect, right? That being said, the videos we have aren't grainy per se, but they're like low quality. Can they be faked? Of course, absolutely. No questions
yeah.
asked. There's a lot that goes into that though. And the alignment of the disappearance coincides with where it disappeared, when it disappeared, how it disappeared, so forth. And that to me is pretty damning. I don't know. I think the
Has there
government's involved. I
been,
just don't know why or
yeah,
how.
has there been
Unless,
anybody that,
go ahead.
unless, no, I want to hear your unless.
Okay, I was gonna say
Sounded like you had something
unless
big. You better have something
I,
good.
it just hit me. So I just watched Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson, and
Uh-huh.
Elon has long been an advocate saying that he doesn't believe in aliens because they've never come knocking on any of the satellites that he's had in space, and he would post it on X immediately if it happened. It's long been speculated that a lot of the alien craft that we think we're seeing is actually government craft, UFOs, which can
Right.
control gravity. You're effectively bending gravity in front and back, is just how these orbs would work. It's
Right.
been speculated that a lot of the government videos that we have, and part of the reason that they've been suppressed is because you have these government contractors that were probably given a UFO, also another suspicion. They're crafting it, they're
Hmm.
creating them man-made, and they're flying them around testing. They can't tell the military people because military's not supposed to know. Only the top guys, top secret clearance. Um, who preceded JFK? Was it Eisenhower right before?
That's a fucking great question, and I know history too. I'm gonna Google it real quick.
Okay, look it up because that president had warned the United States that companies like creating
It
organizations like the
was yeah, it was
CIA, the
Eisenhower.
FBI, it was Eisenhower. So Eisenhower
Yep,
warned the
right.
United States that CIA, FBI, all of these government organizations are great to have. It's great to have standards and controls, but you have to continue to check them, keep them in balance. And when the Bay of Pigs invasion failed terribly for JFK, he wanted to reorg the CIA, which is why they offed them, right?
I was just gonna
Now,
say, and then JFK came aboard and wanted to get rid of a bunch of shit, and look what happened to him.
and because he would call Eisenhower for advice all the time. This is what he said. And he
Yep.
said the problem with these other organizations is you're giving out government contracts, and if you allow those private contractors to get too strong, if you allow these other agencies to get too strong, they're going to start to do things behind your back and behind the books that only the top people know, and that becomes the shadow government. Eisenhower warned about that. JFK tried to stop that, and look what happened. So flash that all the way forward. There's speculation that these UFOs that we have, maybe we did have crash landings and they were a gift to us, however it was. They go to these private contractors, which is why Boeing is getting 4 times the amount of money for a NASA program than SpaceX is, and they're not doing anything. SpaceX is doing everything, but Boeing is
Yeah.
getting paid 4 times the amount. Why? Where's that money going? Because it's going to a top secret program. So this is my speculation now. If you believe all that now, what Elon is saying, these orbs could be U.S. government or government contractors testing these orbs out. So to your point,
Hmm.
you said this before, that sometimes these big companies, these corporations do whatever the fuck they want. Maybe that's what they're doing. And
Yeah.
maybe there was something, because now you're thinking technology that has to do with the semiconductors. Maybe there was something else going on in that plane. Maybe they threatened this pilot. Maybe they have somebody on that plane and they want to get control of some technology or off this person so they don't interfere with what they're doing. And maybe they're testing this new alien technology type stuff, which is these orbs that maybe it vaporizes the plane out of the sky completely. They send in a cargo ship. They pick that shit up. They get it out of there. Maybe they just knock it out. Maybe the flash is just killing the engine and dropping it out of the sky. Maybe it's
Yeah.
wormhole. I don't know what the technology is behind that, but that could be that's where my mind
Yeah.
went right there. Bingo.
Well, dude, we talked about it on one of the last episodes that we recorded, which was the massacre at Mandalay Bay, right? Sometimes you can kill multiple birds with one stone, right? So maybe they want those patents.
Yep.
Maybe there are people on that plane that they want. And hey, guess what? This is a great opportunity for us to test that thing that Boeing's making for us. I don't mean Boeing, but whomever.
Yeah,
right?
whatever.
Government contractor is working for us.
Please. We know what you did to the last whistleblower.
Yeah.
We're not whistleblowing.
The last couple of whistleblowers.
Speculation. Blame it on Honeywell.
Right?
Whoever's the least violent.
So,
I don't know.
Point being, maybe it's just a great way to get multiple things accomplished. Who knows? I think my two strongest theories, and it all hinges on, is that video real? Is that video bullshit?
Yeah.
I think if the video is bullshit, I go back to something occurred with the pilots, right? I think that pilot probably, downed that plane for whatever reason. And this is
for our reason.
This is a deep one, dude. This is almost kind of like the octopus. What was that thing on Netflix?
The Octopus Murders,
The Octopus Murders, right? There's a lot of intertwined tangles, and it gets very spider web-ish, if you will. So I think if the video is bullshit, I point to the pilots. If that video is real, my God, who knows what we're looking at? I think it's likely something to do with some government, some 3-letter government agency somewhere, or a contractor that works for them.
If that video is real, man, the amount of technology that we have that is sitting under our noses is absolutely astonishing.
Wild.
Yep. Love to hear what you guys think out there. What happened to MH370? And like Manifest, are we going to see it pop up? This is the 10th year anniversary, I believe, where we're coming up on it. It's 2024. When did I say it was? October? Oh, no, it was March 8th. March 8th.
That was March. Yeah.
I did see something and I tagged it. And let me see if I still have it here. Did I not save it is the question. Okay. I thought it was so absurd, and the date doesn't coincide, but it was something, I don't know if it was from Reddit or 4chan or something like that. I don't have the full context, so I apologize, but it basically said, it was a clip of somebody saying that a plane will appear over, I don't know, the White House, the Pentagon or something that had been vanished on October 19th. We're supposed to see some vanished plane reappear somewhere.
Hey, coming up, baby.
That is next Saturday, not this coming Saturday when we're recording it, the following Saturday. And by the time this episode airs, it'll probably be about the 24th, maybe around there. I think this will probably end up being the 24th episode. So if that happens, you didn't hear it here first, or maybe you did, but if it happens, just know that we talked about it first here before. But that'll wrap up today's episode of MH370. Again, one of my favorites. That I've been itching to get to. If any of you have any information out there, or maybe you were directly affected, we'd love to hear from you, get you on as guests. Stay tuned in with us on YouTube. Click that like button, helps us out quite a bit. And remember to click that subscribe. If you want, the bell will give you notifications. Popping out episodes every Thursday morning. Typically come out about 8 o'clock sharp. We're on Spotify. Give us a little follow on there. Leave some comments on Spotify. That's super helpful too. Kind of gets us engaged. We promise to respond to everything on YouTube and Spotify, or all the other social channels too. The X's,
Rumble.
the Instagrams, the Facebooks.
Rumble. Yep.
Rumble, yes, I always forget about the Rumble. We're doing pretty good on Rumble too. It's a lot of action on there, and hopefully, I mean, they're always supposed to be the ones that'll never ban us, so that's always a good thing, right?
Appreciate it, Rumble.
That's their fallback. Follow us everywhere, just in case we post something out there that somebody doesn't like and they knock us down. But until next time, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, cocktails and conspiracies. We're all done here.
Sláinte.